Welcome back. Astral has had a tough time recording its first annual loss in 23 years. That's as it took a 2.1 billion rand hit related to costs that had to do with load shedding, the bird flu and water disruptions. And joining me now is the company's CEO, Chris Schutte. Thank you so much for your time, Chris. Of course, we saw those declines from revenue all the way down to the headline earnings per share. Would you say that the results during this period was just a story of costs?
Absolutely. And I think it started off with our raw material, animal feed or poultry feed, that make up about 70% of the total cost of producing a chicken. And that moved by 20% upwards. And to recover that in the market from the consumer is already a challenge. Then we had the load shedding, and that contributed additional 1.6 billion rand to the additional cost, and that obviously made up by additional feed to birds that we couldn't process that were on farm, and bigger birds, and they eat more, and then you have to learn to feed them, not to grow, otherwise you can't slaughter them. And then of course additional shifts to slaughter over weekends, and then we had to install generators with a capex totaling 186 million, and they obviously are very thirsty for diesel. And with the diesel price going north, that was an extreme cost contributor to the tune of about 45 million rand per month. Now, all of that did unfortunately increase the cost of producing chicken. And then right towards the end of the year, we had this extreme break of avian flu or bird flu, and that slapped an additional 400 million to our cost bill for the year. So in total, a 2.1 billion rand extraordinary additional cost to produce a chicken.
Well, actually, what is the state of the bird flu looking like right now?
Well, there's a lot being said about bird flu. The epicenter was up here on the West Rand in the old Transvaal or Gauteng area. Now, the infection rate has come off, but for one reason only: there's hardly any birds left to be infected. So people say it's under control, and I see some of the government institutions claim they've got bird flu under control. But the stocking density of poultry on the West Rand was so high that when the bird flu swept in here, we lost all our birds. We lost 40% of our total breeding stock throughout the country, and 95% of that was up around the West Rand of Gauteng. So no birds left in this area, so the infection rate will come off.
Yeah, and I mean, actually just bringing government into this, what have the engagements looked like there in terms of cost mitigation and maybe cost recovery at some point?
Well, first on the cost recovery, in most parts of the world, or in all other parts of the world that we're aware of, when you have to unfortunately kill or deplete or depopulate your birds to control the virus, the only way is to kill birds and bury them to control the spread of the virus. And in other countries, the farmers get compensated. The government also take control over these farms. They quarantine them, they take control, they kill the birds, and they compensate you for that loss. South Africa is the only country in the world where we are dependent on ourselves. So you have to do everything yourself. You are forced by law to kill off your flocks, but you're not compensated. So losing 40% of your breeding stock, it's going to take time, money, and effort to restock that.
Yeah. And I'm just wondering then, because you spoke about how recovering these input costs from the consumers is quite a challenge. So what do the subsidies on those selling prices look like at this point?
Yeah, in general, over the year, we're subsidizing the feed cost, we're subsidizing the diesel bill. We are subsidize, maybe not the right word, we're absorbing that cost. So
Yes.
you can call it a subsidization,
Yeah.
but we're not insensitive to the plight of the consumer. So trying to recover your input cost is just a very simple business rule. If you can't recover your input costs, you don't have a viable business. So we have to do that. Over the past 14 months, we've been subsidizing numerous of this additional or extraordinary cost to the tune of about R3 a kilo. And unfortunately, that's not sustainable. So we've come to a point where, unfortunately, we have to correct prices. And it's not a price increase, it's a correction.
Yeah.
And we're going to try and do that stepwise, not to have a massive burden on the consumer over the festive season.
Yeah. And I mean, Chris, with the chicken shortages because of the bird flu, has there been any pressure on the local chicken producing industry from imports?
So there's two business areas in poultry. The one is chickens that produce table eggs, and we've already seen a shortage of table eggs. Where in the industry that we are, the broiler industry, where we produce meat, it's slightly different. So we had some extra production levers that we could pull up in our integrated production facilities. And we don't foresee any shortage. Obviously, there's a vacuum.
Yeah.
That vacuum currently is being made good with Astral importing fertile eggs from across the globe to fill that gap. We've already landed in the order of 7 million eggs in South Africa, but again at a massive cost. So that cost is directly related to load shedding and bird flu.
Yeah.
And that cost somewhere must be absorbed, and currently we're doing that. We can't do it for too long.
Yeah.
Just imagine flying a fertile egg across the globe in a chartered Boeing. You know, it adds cost.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and for just giving us some color on those numbers that came out of Astral Foods. Of course, we will be looking very closely into the developments in the next 6 months or so as you try and rebuild your balance sheet. That was the CEO of Astral, Chris Schutte.